Hey guys, one last video. This one is going to be about parallel structure. So you already have the PowerPoint posted for awkward or unclear wording, I think is what it's called. The first half of it was dangling and misplaced modifiers. The second half is parallel structure. So I'm just continuing in that same PowerPoint that you have. Parallel structure is exactly what it sounds like. Compare it to math. You know what a parallel line is. It means that they run side by side. So in parallel structure in English, you want everything to look the same. So if you're going through the slideshow with me, a couple of slides after the title slide, parallel structure, it shows you some elements that can be parallel or non-parallel. Verbs, nouns, pronouns, adjectives, and adverbs. Now that's not all. In your book you'll see, and there's a ton of these, I won't be able to get through them in a video, but there's phrases can be parallel, clauses can be parallel, any items, and this may be something we need to go over next week, next Wednesday when we meet, because Monday's the 4th. And just double check to make sure that you understood all of this, because it is, on a word level, it's pretty easy, but on a sentence level, talking about clauses and phrases, it can be a little more difficult. Okay, so look in your book for a second. This is chapter 24, and I'm on page 510, 511. Sometimes we want to use parallel structure for emphasis, especially when we're speaking, and I'll show you towards the end of the chapter. There's some really neat things about that. But page 511 starts talking about problems with verbs, and you see an example there. Last night we walked the dog and had fed the cat. Why would you go from the past form to the past participle form if you did both of those things last night? That makes no sense. So you would just say, last night we walked the dog and fed the cat. Those are parallel because there's no reason for your verb tense to change. Okay, turn the page with me. Problems with nouns or pronouns. Sometimes we may get into a problem, and this one actually does a sentence. The man interviewed by Piers Morgan was a traveler, an entrepreneur, and entertaining. Traveler is a noun, entrepreneur is a noun, and entertaining is an adjective. So those items are not parallel. Now it's odd that they use that, because an entertainer to me is a star, a performer, but people who are entertaining to be around are not necessarily performers or stars. So that one you might have to play around with the wording just a little bit. Maybe not say entertaining, maybe say and a real clown or something like that, because that would indicate just on a personal level he's fun to be around. So just something to think about there. Page 513 talks about problems with adjectives matching up. They give you the example, Wednesday's guest lecturer was disorganized, rude, and showed up unprepared. You can hear it very clearly in that. Why can I not just say disorganized, rude, and unprepared? Because those are all adjectives. There's no need to add words when fewer words will do the job. And that's a lot of what parallel structure is getting it down to the root of what you're trying to say. Okay, this is pretty easy stuff, but it will take some practice in hearing it. If you'll turn to 514, you see one there at the top of the page, number 1. It's a practice. It says, Miguel ate popcorn, drank water, and was watching Survivor. So hopefully now in hearing what we're doing, you can hear very simply that you would just change it to he ate popcorn, drank water, and watched Survivor. That way, not only are those verbs that you're making parallel, but it's a verb with an object, a verb with an object, and a verb with an object in all three. Ate what? Popcorn. Drank what? Water. Watched what? Survivor. So you've made little phrases, really, a verb and an object, parallel. Okay, 514 talks about problems with adverbs, and it does kind of the same example. Friday's guest lecturer spoke accurately, thoroughly, and in a knowledgeable manner. Again, you sometimes have to reword things, because knowledgeably is not a word I use very often. It's probably not for you either, but that's the correct word to fix that. Accurately is how he spoke, thoroughly is how he spoke, and knowledgeably is how he spoke. So that's how we would technically make it parallel. Okay, move on to 5:15, and you see problems with phrases. This is one of the things I think may be a little harder to hear. A problem with a phrase, at the bottom of the page, they show you one that has prepositional phrases. John has class in the Hinkle Building and Sullivan Center. And they want you to change it to in the Hinkle Building and in the Sullivan Center to make those two prepositional phrases parallel. I don't technically have a problem with that sentence because we know, you know, because you've listened to me lecture about it, you can have a compound object of a preposition. So in could be the preposition, Sullivan Center could be one object, and Hinkle Building could be the other. I don't have a problem with that sentence, but your book corrects it, so we'll go with that. 5:16 moves on to clauses. We know that clauses have subjects and verbs, and they can either be independent or dependent. And they show you some things to do here, like Katie's son promised he would make his bed and not to leave empty glasses in his room. And they show you in the sentence, one's highlighted in green and one's in red, how those are not parallel. He promised he would make his bed and would not leave empty glasses. I know that doesn't sound like a big deal, but what you're doing is streamlining this for your reader. I think I mentioned that in a previous lecture this week about don't make it harder for your reader to understand your meaning, make it easier. And so parallel structure is one of those things that will make it easier for your reader to understand you. Now, back to the PowerPoint, there's a slide that says paired elements. It could be a group of items in a series, or it could just be two items. But I show you here when two elements are joined with a coordinating conjunction, that's fanboys and or but, for, nor, so, and yet, they should be parallel. So not I like to go to the movies and eating popcorn, but I enjoy or I like going to the movies and eating popcorn. So I changed both of my verbs to ing present tense verbs. The next slide has correlative conjunctions, which is not a term I've used with you yet. But basically correlative just means they correlate. So there's two of them, but they work together to be a conjunction. You say these all the time. You probably don't recognize that you're saying them, but they're very common in the English language. This is on page 519 in your book, if you want to also look at that. We say either or. We say either I'm going to work or I'm going to call in. We say that all the time. We say not only did you not call, but you also didn't text, and we'll say not only this, but that. I'm not sure whether or not I'm going to the park today. So all these are very common. And I want you to pay attention, especially page 519 that has examples. The latest blockbuster movie is not only dull, that's not enough, because when you say not only, I want to hear something else. So they correct it by saying the latest blockbuster movie is not only dull, but also poorly edited. Now, dull and poorly edited are parallel, and they're joined by correlative conjunction. Look at your next slide. When you contrast elements, you know about contrasting based on the previous lecture with comparison and contrast paragraph. But when you contrast elements, there's a sentence here. Ray would rather rent video games than buying them. Rent and buying are your issues. So I correct it two ways on the slide for you. Ray would rather rent videos than buy them, and then rent and buy are in the same tense. Or Ray prefers renting video games to buying them. This kind of goes back to that thing we did last week where we said she is taller than. We want to say me, but it's taller than I am when you finish out the sentence. So when you put them, Ray prefers renting video games to buying. May sound crazy, but when you put them on the end, it makes sense. Again, I just referred to that, but when you go to the next slide, missing elements, This may help you to understand some of the pronoun stuff we did last week. Some comparisons need special care because it is easy to omit necessary words from them. Eleanor is as tall or taller than her brother. We missed a word there, so we correct it two ways. Eleanor is as tall as her brother or taller than her brother. And there's two different ways to to correct that sentence and connect those ideas. So just be aware that when you write a sentence, maybe all the words aren't there, but you have to know what you're leaving out so that you can make it easy for your reader to understand what's left out. Now, the thing I wanted to get to, and make sure you saw this, is on page 521. Parallel structure is important for writing, but it's even more important for speaking. This is not a speech class, but I do want you to understand that they go hand in hand many times. And being a speaker, whether it's a teacher or a trainer in your given profession, if you're going to be a nurse and you're going to be speaking to patients, whatever it may be, you have to be aware that sometimes you have to slow down and give your listener a chance to hear what you're saying. You also have to be able to repeat information that they may not have understood for clarity and that sort of thing. So on page 521, you've got two different quotes from Martin Luther King Jr. and Confucius. And the Martin Luther King, of course, we know his famous speech, but it was very powerful because of the way he structured his sentences. So not only am I looking at it, but this section is titled Listen for Parallelism. So listen to me read this. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together. Notice how he puts his strongest point last, because he's creating that repetition for you and building momentum till he gets to his last point. Same thing with the Confucius quote. I hear and I forget. I see and I remember. I do and I understand. And that, of course, relates to education. If you're just talking to people and not giving them a chance to get hands-on with things, there's a good chance they're not going to understand it. If you show them, they might remember you showing them, but if you let them get hands-on and do something, they'll remember and understand it. So, again, he builds that momentum and that drama, I guess is a term I've used before, by I hear and I forget. And each thing is parallel, but it's so powerful in its simplicity. So I do want you to start looking for parallel structure in your own writing. Good luck on the MyLabs. And remember, we won't meet in class on Monday because of the holiday, so I will see you on Wednesday. I hope you have a great 4th.